Well, greetings everyone and welcome to the Law Hour and Editorial Review. The Law Hour is sponsored by the Gordon Law School of Isabella, Missouri. Now, the Law Hour is an educational service brought to you in the public interest. I'm your narrator, George Gordon. Now, the Law Hour and Editorial Review is heard nationally and internationally 7 days a week here in the United States and in more than 120 countries worldwide over the Internet. Now, for more information about the Law Hour and Editorial Review, please visit our webpage at georgegordon.org. Again, that's georgegordon.org. Now, the Law Hour and Editorial Review brings you important information about law, science, education, business, politics, religion, health, history, economics, news, and current events. So stay tuned for tonight's special report on privacy when we come back. You know, 3,300 years ago, Moses instructed our fathers. He said, "You shall not have in your bag diverse weights, a great and a small. You shall not have in your house diverse measures, a great and a small, but you shall have a perfect and a just weight, and a perfect and a just measure shall you have." Well, you know, our founding fathers at the Constitutional Convention in 1787 followed that scriptural principle of law when they put into our federal Constitution, at Article 1, Section 10, these 17 words. It says, "No state shall make anything but gold or silver coin a tender in payment of debts." But in 1933, President Roosevelt took our gold away, and in 1964, President Johnson took silver coin out of circulation. In place of just weights and balances, these two presidents introduced our current practice of the first, second, and fifth planks of the Communist Manifesto into our monetary system, and they gave us Federal Reserve notes in place of gold-backed Treasury bills and clad coinage in place of silver coins. Now, in the intervening 70 years or so, we Americans have gone from being the world's #1 creditor nation until today we're the world's #1 debtor nation. Now, who do you think were the better financial planners for our country? Moses and our founding fathers, or Franklin D. Roosevelt and Lyndon Baines Johnson? Now, if you'd like to learn more about hard money and how to use it properly, it's another of the many lessons that we teach here in our Mosaic Law School, conducted twice a year here at the law school in Isabella, Missouri. Now, if you'd like to learn more, why don't you call and order our free General Law CD package first. That's the place to start. Doesn't cost you anything. It's a 4-hour commentary on the law in general, and it's educational, it's informative, it's entertaining, and best of all, it's free. You can call and order one right now. The number is 417-273-4967. Once more, that's area code 417-273-4967. Now, our Mosaic Law School is also available on compact disc for adult home study. If you're online, you can go to our website, georgegordon.org. Click onto the archives page, and you can download that free General Law CD package right there. That's georgegordon.org, and then go to the archives page. Hey, we've been talking about this thing of privacy and privacy issues, and there's a case called Laird v. Tatum. It was decided back in the 1970s. And one of our Supreme Court justices, a guy by the name of William O. Douglas, he was a kind of a maverick on the court. He was appointed in 1937 by Franklin D. Roosevelt when he was packing the court. Maybe you heard of that Supreme Court packing program. Well, he picked the wrong guy when he picked this guy Douglas, because while he was a judge, he was kind of a maverick. Now, here's what Douglas had to say about this thing of privacy and privacy rights. He said, "Army intelligence has, without notice to its civilian superiors, overstepped its mission. From 1917 to 1924, the Corps of Intelligence Police maintained a massive surveillance of civilian political activity, which involved the use of hundreds of civilian informants, the infiltration of civilian organizations, and the seizure of dissenters and unionists, sometimes without charges. Now, that activity was opposed, then as now, by civilian officials on those occasions when they found out about it. But it continued unabated until post-war disarmament and economies finally eliminated the bureaucracy that conducted it. Now, this case is a cancer in our body politic. It's a measure of the disease which afflicts us. Army surveillance, like Army regimentation, is at war with the principles of the First Amendment. Those who already walk submissively will say there's no cause for alarm. But submissiveness is not our heritage. The First Amendment was designed to allow rebellion to remain as our heritage. The Constitution was designed to keep government off the backs of the people, and the Bill of Rights was added to keep the precincts of belief and expression, of the press, of political and social activities free from government surveillance. The Bill of Rights was designed to keep agents of government and official eavesdroppers away from assemblies of people. The aim was to allow men to be free and independent and to assert their rights against government. There can be no influence more paralyzing of that objective than Army surveillance. When an intelligence officer looks over every nonconformist's shoulder in the library or walks invisibly by his side in a picket line, or infiltrates his club, the America once extolled as the voice of liberty heard round the world no longer is. Now, I wished I would have thought of that, but that was written by a Supreme Court justice. He was on the bench from 37 to about 75. Let's see, that's 47, 57, 67, and, pushing 40 years. He was a maverick. He had a lot to say. He wrote more dissenting opinions than any other justice. And he used to have a kind of a watchword. He would say, "We have reached the right conclusion for all of the wrong reasons." I like that. We've reached the right conclusion, but for all of the wrong reasons. And then he'd set out and he'd say, now here's what's really going on here. And I think that this little treatise that he wrote here, it's in a case called Laird v. Tatum, cited at 408 U.S. 1. Laird v. Tatum, 408 U.S. 1. And you'll find this little section here on page 29 and 30. Take a look at that and see what you think of that. Now, he had more to say about that. I mean, this guy had a lot to say. And let me give you a few points that he pointed out from his position as a justice on the Supreme Court. He wrote a book called Points of Rebellion. Did you hear that when he said our Constitution was designed to allow rebellion to remain as our heritage? Now, President Bush or some of these politico types, they'd say, well, that's anarchy. We can't have that. That's what freedom is all about. Freedom is the right to make choices. The greatest champion of freedom in the history of the world is our Creator, God Almighty. In fact, in a number of places in the Scripture, and particularly in Deuteronomy 30, he lays it out in spades and tells us plainly, here's where the rubber meets the road, now make a choice. He usually takes the time, effort, and energy to tell you, here's the right choice to make, this is what I'm recommending, but he says, I think life is what you want to choose life. But if you want to choose death, that's fine. I can help you. I'll accommodate you. Well, here's what William O. Douglas had to say. Quote, a speaker who resists arrest is acting as a free man. The police do not have carte blanche to interfere with his freedom, and they do not have the license to arrest at will or to silence people at will. Now, could you believe that a judge would make a statement like that? Well, I imagine all you policemen out there listening to that statement are cringing right now and saying, "Oh my God, only a bank robber would say something like that." No, that's one of the justices of the Supreme Court. I can cite all kinds of judges who've made statements like this. I have file folders full of statements. It's just that this guy articulates it so well, I thought I'd select one judge out. And not just any judge, but rather a justice of the Supreme Court. Here's a second one of his wise old sayings. He said, "Man has come to realize that if he is to have material success, he must honor the folklore of the corporation state, respect its desires, and walk to the measure of its thinking. The interests of the corporation state are to convert all of the riches of the earth into dollars." I put a little note in the margin, New World Order. Here's a third statement. He said, "A man's belief is his own. He is the keeper of his conscience, and Big Brother has no rightful concern in these areas." Number 4. He said, "The descent that we witness is a reaffirmation of faith in man. It is protest against living under rules and prejudices and attitudes that produce the extremes of wealth and poverty, and that make us dedicated to the destruction of people through arms, bombs, and gases, and that prepare us to think alike and be submissive objects for the regime of the computer." He also said, "We got rid of our debtors' prisons in the last century, but today's garnishment proceedings are as destructive and vicious as the debtors' dungeons." He went on to say, "The truth is that a vast bureaucracy now runs this country irrespective of what party is in power." He said, "The two parties have become almost indistinguishable, and each is controlled by the establishment. The modern-day dissenters and protesters are functioning as the loyal opposition functions in England. They are the mounting voice of political opposition to the status quo, calling for revolutionary changes in our institutions." He went on to say, "The truth is that a vast restructuring of our society is needed if remedies are to become available to the average person. Without that restructuring, the goodwill that holds society together will be slowly dissipated." He said, "Any tax deduction is in reality a tax expenditure." He said, "People march and protest, but they are not heard." And then he said, "But where grievances pile high, and most of the elected spokesmen represent the establishment, violence may be the only effective response." Did you get that? He said, revolutions are fought, and they're usually violent, and they're usually disagreeable to everybody on both sides. But when you get down on the bottom line, if there isn't any other remedy available, well, then violence is the ultimate end, isn't it? Let me read that one to you again. He said, "But where grievances pile high, and most of the elected spokesmen represent the establishment, violence may be the only effective response." Now, that was the Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas said that. Don't blame it on me now. I'm just citing it for you. He went on to say that George III, this is King George, King George III was the symbol against which our founders made a revolution now considered bright and glorious. George III had not crossed the seas to fasten a foreign yoke upon us. George III and his dynasty had established and nurtured us, and all that he did was by no means oppressive. But a vast restructuring of laws and institutions was necessary if the people were to be content. That restructuring was not forthcoming, and there was a revolution. Douglas said, "We must realize that today's establishment is the new George III. Now, whether it will continue to adhere to his tactics, we do not know. But if it does, the redress honored in tradition is also revolution." Now, few people want to destroy the system. The aim of most of them is to regain the freedom of choice that their ancestors lost, to be free, to be masters of their own destiny. He went on to say, "The search of the youth today is for ways and means to make the machine and the vast bureaucracy of the corporation state and of government that runs the machine, the servant of man." That is the revolution that is coming. That revolution, now that the people hold the residual powers of government, need not be a repetition of 1776. It could be a revolution in the nature of an explosive political regeneration. It just depends on how wise the establishment is. If, with its stockpile of arms, it resolves to suppress the dissenters, America will face, I fear, an awful ordeal. Cited from Points of Rebellion, William O. Douglas, Random House, 1970. Well worth the time, effort, and energy to read the book. It's not all filled with these neat, pointed quotations, so I thought I would cite from Points of Rebellion some of the more salient points that he brought out. Now, I mentioned to you the other day that there are 63 sources of information that government agents go to in order to get information about you. So let me just give you a few of them so that you can see that these are things that normal people do and have. And things like your medical records, dental records, hospital records, psychiatric records, prescription records, magazine subscriptions, emails, telephone records, bookstore purchases, tax records at the federal level, tax records at the state level, your sales tax records, library records, power company, garbage company and gas company records, genetic information, high school records, grammar school records, college records, military records, welfare records, fish and game licenses, driver's license, traffic records, insurance records, life insurance and medical examinations, memberships in the NRA or the Republican or Democratic parties or any other memberships and organizations, diaries, charitable contributions, airline reservations, airline tickets, hotel records, magazine subscriptions, newspaper subscriptions, lodge memberships, prison records. You know, most of us have all of those, or most of them. You may not have every single one of them, but you've got a bunch, and that's just half of them. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Now, government goes around and they're trying to get this information, you know, maybe from your union. That could be a source, you know, union membership. Or your union dues, your union activities. Your employment records. You know, your employer has a lot of information about you. And now the government can walk in, get this information from these sources, and nobody's ever going to tell you about it. There's a treatise put out here by the ACLU. That's called the American Civil Liberties Union. Everybody hates the ACLU for one reason or another. because they promote, here's why I don't like them, they promote evolution, and they were instrumental in taking the Bible and God and prayer out of our public schools. But on the other hand, the ACLU is a champion of our Constitution and constitutional rights. Everybody hates the ACLU. And that's because the ACLU steps on everybody's toes. There are no exceptions to the rule. I mean, they step on communist toes, Republican toes. They step on religious toes. They step on atheist toes. I mean, if you've got toes to step on, the ACLU is going to step on them. I know you've read stories about them, and everybody's got an article or something to if you're religious, you wrote an article and said how anti-God and how bad they are. And if you're an atheist, you wrote a letter and you said, here's how rotten and dirty and nasty these guys are because they're promoting religion and they're hypocrites. There isn't any winning when you take a position. That's why everybody hates the Bible. They hate the Bible. And that's because God steps on everybody's toes, without exception. And, maybe with good cause. I'm not sitting here telling you, that you should be a lover of the ACLU or a lover of God and the Bible, but I'm just telling you the reason when you get down on the bottom line that people don't like God and the Bible is because He exposes everybody's sins. And the ACLU does a pretty good job along that line. I wouldn't quite compare them with God, but, they do a pretty good job. And in this case here, they did a pretty good job on this unpatriotic acts, an ACLU report. The FBI's power to rifle through your records and your personal belongings without telling you. Then he starts off with this little story. He says, imagine this scenario. You flee Iraq after being imprisoned and persecuted for your political views. When you arrive in the United States, a local charity helps you find housing and medical care. You start a small business. You join a mosque. You become active in Muslim community associations. You use email at the public library to keep in touch with your extended family in Iraq and to discuss politics with friends. 2 years later, you're grateful for the freedoms that you enjoy in your new home, the United States of America. When the United States invades Iraq, you are thankful to be rid of Saddam Hussein, but you are angry about civilian casualties and the extended U.S. occupation. You write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper encouraging a quick transfer of power to Iraqi civilian government. An FBI agent who is conducting an investigation of another Iraqi American notices your letter and finds it troubling. Based on the letter, the sound of your name, and the outside possibility that you may be connected to the people that he is investigating, he decides to investigate you also. So he goes to a secret court, and he gets an order that forces the library and its internet service provider to turn over all of your email messages. Then he gets another secret order to obtain records from the charity that helped you when you first arrived in the United States. Those records lead him to the local hospital, where he obtains records of medical treatment that you received there. He then serves another order on the local mosque to find out whether or not you're a member or serve in any leadership position. Though he has uncovered nothing suspicious about you in his fishing expedition, he gets another secret order forcing the Muslim Community Association to turn over its entire membership list to him. And if not, he thinks maybe another member has some connection to those people that he is investigating. Now, as it turns out, you never learned that the FBI is spying on you. The FBI certainly doesn't tell you. And the library, the charity, the hospital, and the mosque, and the community association are all prohibited by law forever from telling you or anyone else that the FBI has asked for your records. You simply never learn that the government has been rifling through your life. Now, could such a thing happen to you or someone you know? Perhaps it already has. The USA Patriot Act vastly expands the FBI's authority to monitor people living in the United States. These powers can be used not only against terrorists and spies, but also against ordinary law-abiding people, immigrants from Iraq or immigrants from Italy, Denmark, or Sweden, dentists from Detroit or Denver, truck drivers from Tampa or Tulsa, painters from Peoria or Pittsburgh. Indeed, the FBI can use these powers to spy on any United States citizen or resident, whether he's a Muslim, a Catholic, a Protestant, or a Jew. And this report now examines in detail one Patriot Act provision at Section 215, which gives the FBI unprecedented access to sensitive personal records and any tangible things. The report explains why Section 215 is misguided, dangerous, and unconstitutional. It reviews the history of unlawful surveillance and explains why it would be a serious mistake for us to rely upon the government to police itself. The report also documents attempts by Congress and the ACLU to challenge the secrecy surrounding the FBI's use of Section 215, and it exposes a government disinformation campaign apparently intended to mislead the American public about the nature and scope of this new power. And finally, the report explains what the ACLU is doing and what you can do to get Section 215 off the books. Now, I'm not here to extol the ACLU, but I'll bet you if you went to the ACLU website, the national headquarters is located at 125 Broad Street. That's 18th floor, New York, New York, 10004. That's 10004-2400. Their webpage is www.aclu.org. Once more, that's www.aclu.org. In order to get the full report. I can't read you the entire report, but it talks about Section 215 and explains in detail what the problem is and what these national security letters are and how that act got passed and the Library Awareness Program, and what you can do to help the ACLU get it off the books. I mean, these ACLU people are lawyers primarily. Generally speaking, the ACLU is a radical, liberal, communist front organization, which probably is doing more to destroy the United States of America than most any other organization in the country. Now, that's my personal opinion. But, but at the same time, these are people just like you and I, being radical libs. They, too, are being investigated by the FBI. In fact, the ACLU is on the FBI's list. I can't for the life of me figure out why, but they are. It may be disinformation, but nevertheless, they're on the list. And they want to do something about 215, and their information is informative. Whether you use it or act upon it, that's your choice in life. But at least it will inform you as to what the government is doing from a lawyer's point of view and why they believe it's unconstitutional. All right, now with that much out of the way, I've got a paper here called Privacy in the Electronic Age. And I'm going to take a look at this, and we'll go through it when we take our break. And here, I got to pause here for a minute. Take our break and remind you that you are listening to the Law Hour and Editorial Review, and that we are sponsored by the Gordon Law School of Isabella, Missouri. Now, the Law Hour is heard 7 days a week here in the United States and in more than 120 countries daily over the Internet and radio. Now, if you'd like more information about the Law School and the Law Hour, please go to our website at georgegordon.org. The Law School teaches family law, tax law, courtroom strategy and procedure, business law, agricultural law, civil rights, and biblical law from the scriptural perspective. Now, that's 8 schools in all. The Law School is a private, non-commercial, non-profit, non-sectarian law school. It is open to individuals, but by prearrangement. Now, the Law School conducts a homeschooling program for adults and compact disc, and the Law Hour website is updated weekly. It has our radio log schedule and archives. All of it can be accessed through our website at georgegordon.org. Now, all of these Law Hour programs are archived on the Internet by title and date for your listening convenience. The Law Hour is an educational service brought to you in the public interest, and the Law School offers a free 4-hour introductory CD package. Now, be sure to order yours by calling and asking for it. The number is 417-273-4967. Once more, that's area code 417-273-4967. Now, if you're online, you can go to our website. It's georgegordon.org, georgegordon.org. Click onto the archives page, and you can download that free general law CD package right there. Now, the sources of information that we use on this program are true, accurate, and correct to the best of our knowledge and belief. The Law Hour and Editorial Review gives credit to those authors and publications that we use on this program, and we often endorse or recommend books, papers, periodicals, and newsletters to our listeners. These endorsements, these recommendations that we give, don't mean that the authors or the publications that we're endorsing will necessarily reciprocate. Keep in mind that most of these authors and publications that we cite here on the Law Hour and Editorial Review, they may be hostile, political, religious, economic, sectarian, racial, or ethnic partisans, and their viewpoints may not be totally endorsed by the Law Hour and Editorial Review either. These opinions, beliefs, comments, views, and expressions that you hear on this program are mine and mine alone, and they don't necessarily represent the views, beliefs, or the opinions of the advertisers, the sponsors, the management, or the staff of this radio network or of this local radio station. Now, if you'd like more information about the Law Hour and Editorial Review, please go to our website at georgegordon.org. Again, georgegordon.org, or call us direct at 417-273-4967. Oftentimes I'll make mention and say, can we have privacy in the electronic age? And I've pointed out, yeah, you can have privacy in the electronic age. You bet. And can you keep your activities private and undercover? Yeah, you can. Can you do it in every single aspect of life? No. You see, to give you an illustration, there are television cameras all over town. They've got them all over Springfield. They got them all over London. They're looking for terrorists. This is what their claim to fame is. We're looking for terrorists. So when you're walking down the street in Piccadilly Circus and there's a TV camera up there, it's monitoring you just like me and everybody else. There isn't anything you can do about that. That's a public place. If you want to avail yourself of that public place, well, The policeman, oftentimes, government will station a policeman. He'll just be standing there on the street corner, and he's got his eyes out there, and he's looking and watching everybody that goes by. We had a famous case here in the United States. There was a cop in, this guy's name is Terry. Or the cop's name may not have been Terry. Maybe it was the guy that he arrested. But it's called the Terry Stop and Frisk Rule. Well, anyway, this cop is standing here on the street, and he's observing this guy walking up and down the street in front of a store. And after about, 5 minutes of watching this guy, another guy takes his place, and he walks up and down the street. So, to this cop, from his experience, he says, hey, these two guys are casing this store to hold it up. So the cop is no dummy. He's profiling these guys. He can see that normal people, plumbers and carpenters and electricians, they may walk down the street, stop, look in the window, and walk on down the street. But when a guy goes down to the corner, and then he walks back to the other corner, and then he walks back to the other corner, and then he walks back to the other corner, acting like he's just real cool and nonchalant, right away this cop says, hey, that ain't kosher. There's something wrong here. So, after a little while, this cop walks up to this guy, and he tells this guy, hey, I'm a cop, put your hands up, keep them where I can see them, and he frisks this guy, and he finds that he's carrying a gun under his armpit, concealed weapon. So he arrests this guy. In fact, he arrested both of them. And then, of course, I don't know if it's the ACLU that got involved in the case, or but the defense attorneys, they took this up to the Supreme Court, and they said, hey, this is an unlawful search and seizure. This cop over here went way out and far beyond the Fourth Amendment in this case. And so the Supreme Court looked at that, and they say, well, look, we need to balance. We need a balance here between the police doing their jobs and the average Joe Six-Pack citizen, who's entitled to be, free from unlawful search and seizure. So they cut out a new rule of law. And some people call this judicial legislation. Actually, it's called a judgment. And we see these judgments in the Bible. They go back for thousands of years. The lawmaking authority passes a law, and then they create a statute in support of it. Like thou shalt not steal, then the statute says you shall not have an unjust weight or balance in your bag. And then when you actually construe it, you got to have a court opinion, a judgment as to how to implement it. So the Supreme Court cut this rule out, and they called it the Terry Stop and Frisk Rule. So the highway patrolman stops you on the highway, and he says, now get out of your car. And now he says, they usually ask you, are you packing heat? And then if you are, you should say, yes, I've got a gun, and yes, I've got a permit. I'm carrying it under my armpit. It's under the seat. It's on the dashboard. It's in the trunk of the car. You should. And that's for the purposes of protecting the policeman, because, see, there's been quite a number of guys who just pull a gun out. The cop's there to give you a speeding ticket. The guy gets ticked off, whips out a gun, kills the cop. The cop doesn't deserve getting killed, does he, just because he's writing you a speeding ticket? But anyway, that happens. And so now we got to have some kind of see, our Constitution is written for a moral people. Well, when the people cease to be moral and they're whipping out guns and killing people in violation of thou shalt not steal, then the cops have to come back and say, well, God, now we have to do something here to keep from getting killed while we're writing tickets. And so this is one of those kinds of cases, where the cop, in his own self-defense, says, well, I got to keep this guy from killing me while I'm writing him a ticket. So he wants to see if you're packing heat or not. So the Supreme Court comes back and says, yeah, if a cop has reasonable suspicion based upon articulable facts, okay, here's what an articulable fact is. I saw this guy walk from one corner to the other. I saw him do it 3 times in front of a jewelry store. Then I saw him meet another guy. They talked briefly, and then the first guy disappeared, and the second guy walked up and down in front of the jewelry store 3 times. Then they both got back together, and that's when I took action. I had reasonable suspicion at that point in time that these 2 guys were casing the jewelry store to rob it. To prevent the storekeeper from getting killed, I took action, and I went over and frisked these 2 guys, found guns on them, and I arrested them because they were both convicted felons carrying firearms concealed in violation of their parole. All right, so there's the Terry rule. I don't know if that's a good rule or a bad rule. I don't know if it's an infringement on our Fourth Amendment rights. I'm just here to report it. That's the law. That's the way it works. Now, some people would say, well, that's another extension of the police power and another loss of our constitutional rights. And again, I'm not here to be judgmental and say, yeah, it is or no, it isn't. Maybe under the circumstances we need that rule. All right, so now the trade towers get knocked down, and so now we got this war on terror, and now we've got these Muslims, 7 million of them now in the United States, marauding around on our streets. And so, you know, we say, well, we can't use this thing of profiling or categorizing these people. So we have to search everybody. We got to feel up every testicle that walks through the airport now and look up every bunghole, you know, in order to determine whether or not this guy's packing explosives in his anal cavity. And maybe he is. You know, now we got to take everybody's shoes off. And you can't carry a bottle of water on the airplane. And so that sends a signal to me. It says, well, the logical thing to do is for me to stay off of airplanes. I haven't been on an airplane for 10 years. And it'll be a long time before I get on another one. It is demonstrated to me that airplanes are dangerous, that the terrorists have won the war. They have barred us from using our own airplanes. They have reduced us to cringing cowards, fleeing in terror when no one pursues. They have succeeded in thwarting our Bill of Rights, and they have reduced us to slaves who are constantly being searched and felt up by government agents. And that's just where it's at. So if you want to know where the score is on the war on terror, the terrorists are winning hands down. We are spending trillions of dollars to protect ourselves from terrorists, and they're spending a few $1,000s. Every time they come up with a terrorist attack that doesn't even succeed, we run out and spend billions of dollars to prevent it from happening again. They can accomplish more with a failed attack than we can with all of our vaunted power, with all of our aircraft carriers, and all of our air forces and nuclear weapons. I mean, it's a spectacle that would make any self-respecting man ashamed to call himself an American. Well, it does me. We used to have a sheriff here in Ozark County, and he was illiterate. He couldn't read and write. He's just a normal, all-American young fella. Anyway, time goes on. He gets elected sheriff. Now his wife can read and write. And so she'd go out with him, you know, and so that way, you know, if there was anything that he had to read, why, she'd be right there. It was like getting 2 sheriffs for the price of one, is what it boils down to. Well, one day, old Max was called out to a bar. There was a barroom brawl in there, see. And so Max went in, and there's 3 or 4 guys in there. And these 3 or 4 guys, you know, they're stirring up a lot of hate and discontent here in the bar. And so Max came in and said, all right, boys, it's time to calm down now. And so these guys all banded together against Max. He was trying to break up the fight and the controversy going in there, and so these four guys came after him. Well, his wife came in the door with a shotgun, and she went kerchunk, kerchunk, and she pointed the gun right at the four guys, and she says, "Okay, you can take him on, but one at a time. You can take him on, but one at a time." And then all four of them, well, if I got to fight with Max and I don't have three other guys to help me so that we can gang up on him, I guess we'll sit down and shut up. Now, that was the time in America when we could be proud to be an American. That's when we could be proud of law enforcement. But the crap that's going on here today, where 10 guys dress up in monkey suits and cover their faces with masks like terrorists and then attack people. They call these SWAT teams. That's nothing to be proud of. We ought to be ashamed of ourselves. And these airport security checks, that's something to be ashamed of. This fiasco in Afghanistan and Iraq, that's something that we ought to put our tails between our legs and be ashamed of. Crummy terrorists out here running around in pickups, for crying out loud, and making asses of us. And then they run across the border into Pakistan. Well, we can't run over there and do anything about it. Didn't we learn anything in Korea about these places of security? What do they call those? Got a name for that. You can't chase them over there now. You got to fight them over here, but you can't chase them over there. You know, there was a time in America when we'd have gone over there and kicked ass up and down Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan if that's what it took. That thing would have been over in 6 months. Been over there fighting for 9 years. Well, listen, the war is a total success for those who are in power, who have an agenda and want to destroy our country. It's a raving success. But for all the rest of us, it's an abysmal failure. So when people turn against the war and then they want to voice their opposition and the government comes against them and they want to put them in jail and discredit them, take away their freedom of speech, reach their hands down our pockets and feel our testicles, huh? Don't you think it's time to wake up and smell the coffee here, children? Now, privacy in the electronic age. I can't change the I can't change the war in Afghanistan or Iraq, but I can sure change the invasion upon my personal privacy. So let's take a look here at personal privacy here in the next program for the balance of this one and the next one. Let me show you what we can do personally. I'm not complaining. Nobody's feeling me up in the airport. Now, in the last few years, the average citizen, particularly if he regularly uses the Internet, whether it be for online shopping or email, has discovered something that others have known for many years. Privacy here in the United States, while not entirely a thing of the past, has been severely compromised in this age of interlinked computers, each with significant amounts of personal data on them. Now, the only way to completely prevent this electronic intrusion into your life is to be a literal hermit, having nothing to do with credit cards, debit cards, mortgages, banks, and phone companies, online computing, etc. Most individuals don't wish to go this far, but still want for some guidelines as to how to minimize the impact of electronic intrusion. By setting forth some basic rules the police and others follow in identification, as well as steps that can be taken to prevent other forms of intrusion, we'd like to help you redeem and or retain some portion of your privacy. So we start off in this privacy in the electronic age by starting off with police identification. When the police want to make an identification, the first things they ask for are your name, birth date, and social security number. Okay, let's start off with that. That birth date over there is an act of occult witchcraft. In the Bible, we're told not to practice birthdays. We practice death days. We observe Jesus' death day, not his birthday. Now, I know you're religious and you practice Christmas, but in the Scripture, Jeremiah 10 says, don't practice the birthday, practice the death day. That's Exodus chapter 12 and Matthew chapter 26. The second thing is the Social Security number. The Social Security, if in fact it's insurance, then violates the strict liability statute in Exodus 21. And if it's the mark of the beast, then it violates the statute or the prohibition in Revelation 13:16. So take your choice, you know? Oh, I don't care whether it's the mark of the beast or if it's limited liability, it's against the law. So you shouldn't have a birth date and you shouldn't have a Social Security number. So I don't have either. God, it just drives the cops nuts. They want to know, where's your identification? And then when you tell them, well, here's my business card. No, I want to see your driver's license, registration, proof of insurance, passport, Social Security number, 2 forms of state-issued ID. And I point out to them, I don't have any forms of state-issued ID. I don't do business with the state of Missouri. You what? I don't do business with the state of Missouri. Why not? Because it's a criminal enterprise. I don't practice crime. And they kind of look at you like, my God, are you Mork from Ork? Are you from this planet? Now, I'm not ashamed of my name. My name is George Gordon, but I don't have a Social Security number and I don't have a birthday. And do you know that without those 3 in combination, the police can't identify you? They want a positive identification. Now, in my case, when they call in, oh, you've got George Gordon there. Oh, well, we know him. He lives in Isabella. Yeah, okay, we know him. They don't know my Social Security number because I don't have one. Now, if you've got one, you could resign it. And if you got a birth date, the only guy that celebrates your birthday is you. Why don't you quit? Why don't you practice the 10 commandment model and give up on the 10 plank model? And all of a sudden, number 1, 2, and 3 up here, they've got your name, but now they can't identify you. Now let's take the next one. The next items on the list are what are known as the gross physical descriptors, which are evident at a distance or which can be obtained from a picture ID. So here's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They're looking for your picture, race, hair color, natural as well as dyed, height, weight, and physical marks, such as birthmarks, tattoos, and scars. Well, now, there are some religious groups that believe that a picture is the violation of the second commandment, which prohibits idols and graven images. I don't subscribe to that. I don't believe it for a minute. But those people, they don't want their pictures taken, and the government is constrained by the First Amendment, right to free exercise of religion, and so they don't take those people's pictures. I don't have any objection for my picture, race, I'm white, hair color is gray now, used to be blonde, height 6 feet, weight 230, and physical marks. I've got a big scar on my chest. I don't have any tattoos. I'm not trying to hide from anybody, and I'm not opposed to you taking my picture out on the street. That's public information. Now, if you don't like any of the above, stop having your picture taken. Get the hell off of Facebook. You know, if you want to dye your hair some other color, there's not much you can do about your height. You could do something about your weight, eat a bunch and gain weight, or stop eating and lose weight. Number 10, physical peculiarities such as limps, amputations, baldness, significant and evident diseases like MD or lupus or Parkinson's disease, something like that, would pretty well identify you. It's another factor. Then come the less evident physical descriptors which are obtainable without a court order, but which you have to be close to a person to observe. This is 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Mannerisms. That is, you always shake with your left hand. Always drinks Sam Adams beer. Speech patterns like accents, vocabulary, and lisps. Eye color. You're left or right-handed, or you're ambidextrous. The type of voice. Handwriting, or your preferred colors or styles of dress, particularly useful if the person dresses unusually, such as hippies, goths, nuns, and Amish. Now, here's a thought. If you want to throw everybody off guard, you dress up like an Amish man. You go up to the Amish community and say, here, let me pay you to make me some Amish clothes, and they'll sew them up for you, and then you can dress up like an Amish man. Grow your beard, shave off your mustache, and then wear one of those Amish hats and walk down the street. Nobody will know who in the hell you are. You ever thought about that? Because the agents, you know, when they're trying to identify you and put you in a little box over here, these people, you know, that speak with an accent, they're really funny. And, you know, they're speaking English, but we can identify them from Texas. Boy, when somebody comes in here from Texas, I can pick them out in a heartbeat. They've got a drawl. They've got an accent that people in California don't have. But then again, that Californian down in Dallas, you know, those people in Dallas, they can pick you out right away as a Yankee. And, you know, you just stand out like a heartbeat. You're speaking English. And they're all sitting down here listening to you, and they say, that guy's a foreigner. He ain't from around here, I can tell that. So these peculiarities that you have over here are identifiers. You know, they sources of information. Here's the way we tell where you're from in the country, by your voice, or your handwriting, or your mannerisms. You always drink Sam Adams beer. If you want to throw people off, you drink a Bud Light once in a while. And then next are the physical descriptors, which are usually only obtainable through consent or with a court order. Things like your fingerprints, DNA, blood type, retinal scan, evidence of surgery, dental records, and records of chronic physical illnesses, you know, things like cancer, diabetes, epilepsy, or something like that. Now, those you can keep secret. That's not against the law. You don't have to give people your fingerprints. You don't have to give them DNA or your blood or a retinal scan. You don't have to take your clothes off and let them stick their hands down your pants. You do that voluntarily. The guy says, it's the law. And you want to get on the airplane, don't you? Do you ever think about telling them, take this ticket and shove it where there's no daylight? And if everybody in America thought like I did, every airline in the country would be bankrupt years ago. Hey, I'm out of time here, kids. We're going to have to give you a final reminder that you are listening to the Law Hour and Editorial Review, and that we're sponsored by the Gordon Law School of Isabella, Missouri. Now, the Law Hour is heard 7 days a week here in the United States. We're heard around the world in more than 120 countries daily over the Internet and radio. If you'd like more information about the Law School and the Law Hour, then please go to our website. Remember, that's georgegordon.org. Now, the law school is a private, non-commercial, non-profit, non-sectarian law school. It is open to individuals, but by prearrangement. The law school conducts a homeschooling program for adults on compact disc. And the Law Hour website is updated weekly, and it has our current radio log, schedule, and archives, and all of that can be accessed through our website at georgegordon.org. Now, all of these Law Hour programs are archived on the Internet by title and date for your listening convenience. And the Law Hour is an educational service brought to you in the public interest. Well, there's the signal. It says our time's up. I got to leave it right there. We'll see you back here tomorrow night. Same time, same station, God willing, of course. So until then, thanks for listening, everybody, and good night, friends.